As a child, I could probably ride before I could walk. I was brought up with ponies, my father.
Breaking news from the palace has everyone talking. A secret leak has revealed something shocking about Camilla and how she handled Diana's memory. Prince William is said to be furious, struggling to come to terms with what has happened. The tension between stepmother and stepson is palpable, and the royal family is quietly dealing with the fallout behind closed doors. How did Camilla's actions cross a line, and what does this mean for Diana's lasting legacy? What really happened that sparked William's anger? Stay with us to find out. The woman who walked in a ghost's shadow. Inside the tall stone walls of Buckingham Palace, life moves like clockwork. Every morning, guards march in perfect lines. Every afternoon, tea is served at exactly the same time. Every evening, curtains are drawn with the same careful hands that have done this job for years. This is how the royal family has lived for hundreds of years. Everything must look perfect. Everything must stay secret. Everything must protect the image that the world sees. But beneath all this careful order, something uneasy stirs. Camilla Parker Bowles became queen consort when her husband Charles took the throne. For many people, this moment felt strange. After all, the world once knew a different woman as the Princess of Wales. Her name was Diana, and even though she died many years ago, her memory still fills every corner of the palace like morning light streaming through old windows. Diana was the people's princess. She held sick children in her arms. She walked through minefields to bring attention to danger. She smiled at cameras but cried behind closed doors. The public loved her with a fierce, protective love that never faded, not even after her tragic death in Paris. When people think of royalty, many still see Diana's face first. Camilla knows this. How could she not? Every time she walks through the palace corridors, she passes portraits and photographs. Every time she attends a public event, people compare her to the woman who came before. Some people have learned to accept her, others never will. This is the reality of her life. She did not ask for Diana's role, yet she must somehow fill the space Diana left behind. The palace staff whisper when they think no one is listening. They remember Diana's warmth and her laughter echoing through these same halls. They remember how she broke royal rules by hugging people instead of shaking hands. They remember her sons, William and Harry, running through gardens while their mother chased them with open arms. Those memories live in the walls like ghosts that refuse to leave. Prince William carries his mother's memory like a precious treasure locked inside his heart. He was only 15 when Diana died, old enough to understand loss, young enough to feel its full crushing weight. Now, a grown man with his own family, William guards his mother's legacy with fierce determination. He speaks her name with reverence. He ensures his children know their grandmother through stories and photographs. He makes certain the world never forgets what she meant. William watches everything carefully. He notices when newspapers write about his mother. He pays attention when historians talk about her impact. He stands as a protective barrier between Diana's memory and anything that might diminish it. This is his duty, not as a prince, but as a son. The palace operates with layers of secrecy that outsiders can barely imagine. Staff members sign agreements promising never to reveal what they see or hear. Advisors meet in private rooms where conversations disappear into thick walls. Every public appearance is planned months in advance. Every word spoken to reporters is carefully chosen. The royal family learned long ago that controlling information means controlling their story. But secrets have a way of becoming heavy. The longer they are kept, the more pressure builds beneath the surface. Inside the palace, people know things that the public does not. They see tensions that cameras never capture. They hear conversations that never reach beyond closed doors. Camilla moves through this world trying to find her place. She attends ceremonies and charity events. She smiles for photographs and waves to crowds. She supports her husband as he navigates being king. Yet she also makes decisions about how the royal family presents itself. She has opinions about which stories should be told and which should remain hidden. She influences what the public learns about the past and the present. Some staff members loyal to Diana's memory watch Camilla's actions closely. They wonder about her intentions. They question whether she truly honors the woman whose place she now occupies. These quiet observers notice small things: a portrait moved from one room to another, a story adjusted in official records, details that most people would never see. The palace insider, someone who has worked within these walls for decades, sees everything. This person knows, where bodies are buried, so to speak. They understand which secrets matter and which powerful people want certain truths to stay hidden. They have watched the royal family through scandals and celebrations, through deaths and births, through changes that shook the very foundations of the monarchy. This insider notices something troubling: small actions that individually mean little but together form a pattern. Decisions being made that seem to slowly reshape how Diana is remembered. Nothing dramatic or obvious, just subtle shifts in how her story is told. The palace runs on tradition and silence. But tradition can be manipulated, and silence can hide many things. As Camilla settles into her role as queen consort, as William protects his mother's memory, and as the palace insider watches carefully, tension builds like storm clouds gathering on a summer afternoon. Everything looks calm on the surface. The guards still march. The tea is still served. The curtains are still drawn, but something is coming. Something that will shake the careful control the palace has maintained for so long. Something involving Diana's memory and the truth about how history is being written. And soon, secrets will refuse to stay buried. Keep watching. Secrets that refuse to stay silent. The palace insider first noticed something wrong on a Tuesday morning in late autumn. Papers sat on a desk in one of the private offices where senior staff meet to discuss matters the public never hears about. These were not ordinary documents. They contained plans to reorganize certain royal archives, instructions to reclassify how specific historical events would be presented in official records, suggestions for which photographs should be featured prominently in upcoming exhibitions and which should be quietly moved to storage. Diana's name appeared throughout these papers, but not in the way anyone expected. The insider, a person who had served the royal family for over 30 years, felt their stomach tighten. They had seen many things during their decades behind palace walls. They had kept countless secrets. They had protected the family through scandals that would have destroyed lesser institutions. But this felt different. This felt like something crossing an invisible line. Over the following weeks, the insider watched more carefully. They attended meetings where senior staff discussed upcoming royal projects. They listened to conversations in hallways where people thought no one important was paying attention. They noticed patterns emerging like constellations slowly becoming visible in a darkening sky. Camilla had begun holding private meetings with specific advisors. These gatherings happened in her personal sitting room, away from the main offices where other royal business took place. The meetings included historians, public relations specialists, and senior staff members who controlled how the royal family's story was told to the world. Sometimes these sessions lasted for hours. Always they ended with everyone leaving separately, slipping out through different doors. No official minutes were kept of these meetings. No formal records existed. But words have a way of escaping even the most carefully guarded rooms. One staff member who attended these sessions mentioned to a trusted colleague that they were discussing narrative consistency. Another spoke vaguely about ensuring the monarchy's story reflected current realities rather than past emotions. A third accidentally let slip that certain aspects of Diana's public image might need contextualizing for modern audiences. The insider began piecing together what these careful words actually meant. Camilla was not erasing Diana from history. That would be impossible and foolish. Diana's impact was too great, her memory too beloved. Instead, something more subtle was happening. The way Diana's story was told was being gently reshaped. Emphasis was shifting. Context was being added that changed how people understood events from decades ago. In one proposed museum exhibition about royal charitable work, Diana's groundbreaking efforts with AIDS patients was mentioned, but given equal weight with more recent initiatives. A documentary being planned about the modern monarchy featured Diana's story, but framed it as part of a larger evolution, rather than the revolutionary moment it truly was. Archives were being reorganized so that certain letters and personal items became harder for researchers to access without special permission. Each action individually seemed reasonable. Each decision could be justified. But together they formed something that troubled anyone who remembered Diana's actual impact. Senior royal staff found themselves caught in an impossible position. They served the current queen consort with the same loyalty they once gave to Diana. They followed orders because that was their duty, yet many of them had worked alongside Diana. They remembered her genuine compassion. They recalled how she transformed what it meant to be royal. They knew that what was happening now, however subtle, diminished something precious. In quiet corners of the palace, whispered conversations took place. A lady-in-waiting expressed concern to a senior advisor. A longtime butler mentioned his discomfort to a fellow staff member. A private secretary questioned whether certain decisions honored the institution or merely served current interests. These people had spent careers protecting royal secrets. Now they wondered whether some secrets deserved protection. The tension reached Prince William through channels that always exist in large institutions. Someone who cared about Diana's legacy made sure he understood what was unfolding. Perhaps it was a carefully worded comment during a formal dinner. Maybe it was a document left where William would find it. Possibly it was a direct conversation with someone brave enough to speak plainly. However the information reached him, William's reaction was immediate and fierce. He began asking questions. He requested to review plans for upcoming projects involving his mother's memory. He inserted himself into decisions where previously he had trusted others to handle details respectfully. Palace staff noticed the shift in William's demeanor. His jaw tightened during certain meetings. His questions became sharper, more pointed. He, who usually maintained careful royal composure, showed flashes of something deeper and more personal. This was not just a prince protecting institutional legacy. This was a son defending his mother. Camilla surely felt the change in atmosphere. The palace might be enormous, but its power circles are surprisingly small. Word travels fast among people who spend their lives reading subtle signals and unspoken tensions. She must have known that William was paying closer attention. The staff members were uncomfortable. Those whispers were moving through corridors like wind through cracks in old walls, yet she continued her quiet campaign. More meetings happened. More decisions were made. More adjustments to how Diana's story would be told moved forward. Perhaps Camilla believed she was helping the monarchy move forward. Perhaps she thought stepping out of Diana's shadow required reshaping that shadow. Perhaps she simply wanted her own legacy to have room to breathe without constant comparison to a ghost. The palace insider watched all of this with growing alarm. They had protected royal secrets their entire career. They understood that discretion was essential to serving the family. But they also understood that some truths mattered more than loyalty to current power. Diana's memory belonged not just to the royal family, but to millions of people who had loved her. Her legacy had changed lives and inspired goodness in the world. The insider faced an impossible choice: speak out and betray everything they had stood for during decades of service, or stay silent and watch as history was quietly rewritten by people who had not earned the right to reshape it. In the palace halls, where portraits of past royals gazed down with painted eyes, where centuries of secrets had been successfully buried, a new secret was growing too large to contain, and someone who had always kept silent was beginning to wonder whether this time silence itself was the betrayal. The day, a son's patience. Broke the plan arrived on William's desk disguised as routine paperwork. It concerned the upcoming 27th anniversary of Diana's death, an occasion the royal family always handled with careful sensitivity. Every year, William and Harry ensured their mother was remembered properly. Statements were released. Charities she supported received renewed attention. The public was reminded of her lasting impact on the world. This year would be different, according to the document William now held in his hands. The proposal suggested a joint memorial event. Diana would be honored, yes, but alongside a broader celebration of royal charitable work spanning multiple generations. Camilla's initiatives would be featured prominently. Current programs would receive equal billing with Diana's revolutionary efforts. The event would be framed as the evolution of royal compassion from past to present, with Diana as a starting point rather than the transformative force she actually was. William read the document 3 times. Each reading made his chest tighter. This was not the first concerning decision. Over recent months, small changes had accumulated like pebbles building into a wall. A planned statue of Diana at Kensington Palace had been delayed repeatedly due to budget concerns, yet funding appeared instantly for other projects. A documentary about Diana's landmine campaign was shelved because it might seem too political, while less controversial royal content moved forward smoothly. Photographs of Diana were being rotated out of prominent palace positions, replaced with images showing the current royal family. Each individual decision came with reasonable explanations. Budgets were tight, political neutrality mattered, fresh content kept the monarchy relevant. But William saw the pattern clearly now. His mother's memory was being managed, controlled, and slowly diminished. The memorial proposal was different because it was so bold. It took something sacred, the anniversary of Diana's death, and turned it into an opportunity to elevate Camilla's image. It used his mother's legacy as a stepping stone for the woman who had caused her so much pain during her lifetime. William called an immediate meeting with the senior advisors who had drafted the proposal. These were men and women who had served the royal family for decades, people William had known since childhood, people he trusted to understand what his mother meant to the world. The meeting took place in a private room overlooking the palace gardens. William stood rather than sat, his tall frame rigid with barely controlled emotion. He held the document in one hand, his knuckles white against the paper. Why, he asked, would anyone think this was appropriate? Why would the anniversary of his mother's death become a platform for comparative achievements? Why was Diana's singular impact being diluted into a generic celebration of royal charity work? The advisors exchanged uncomfortable glances. One cleared his throat and began explaining the reasoning. The monarchy needed to show continuity. The public needed to see that good work continued beyond Diana. Queen Consort Camilla had legitimate accomplishments that deserved recognition. Combining events made practical sense given limited public attention spans. William listened to these explanations with growing disbelief. These people were intelligent and experienced. They understood optics and public perception, which meant they knew exactly what they were doing. This was not innocent efficiency. This was calculated diminishment. Another advisor, braver or perhaps more foolish than the others, suggested that William might be too emotionally close to judge the situation objectively, that his protective feelings for his mother, while understandable, might prevent him from seeing the bigger picture, that the monarchy had to evolve, and evolution sometimes meant difficult changes. The room fell silent after those words. Everyone recognized the mistake immediately. William's voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute authority. He was not just Diana's son at that moment. He was the future king. He reminded the advisors that his mother had saved the monarchy when it was becoming irrelevant. She had shown the world that royalty could be human, compassionate, and genuinely helpful. She had given her life to service while being betrayed by the very institution she worked so hard to modernize. Her legacy, William continued, was not negotiable. It was not a tool for rehabilitating other reputations. It was not raw material to be reshaped for current convenience. The anniversary of her death would honor her alone, as it always had, or there would be no official event at all. He left the room without waiting for responses. Word of William's anger spread through the palace like wildfire through dry grass. Staff members who had witnessed his usual calm composure were shocked by the intensity of his reaction. Those who understood the full context were not surprised at all. They had wondered how long William would tolerate the gradual erosion of his mother's memory before his patience broke. Camilla surely heard about the confrontation within hours. The palace might be large, but news of such dramatic moments travels instantly among people whose job involves reading political currents. She must have realized that her careful campaign had finally pushed too far. But the damage extended beyond one canceled event proposal. William now questioned everything. He began reviewing all decisions made regarding his mother's legacy over the past year. He demanded to see plans for upcoming projects. He inserted himself into processes where previously he had trusted others to act respectfully. What he discovered made everything worse. The memorial proposal was just the most obvious example of a broader strategy. Private letters Diana had written were being reclassified as too sensitive for public access. Plans for a major exhibition about her humanitarian work had been quietly downgraded to a smaller display. References to Diana in official royal communications were being minimized, while Camilla's activities received increasing prominence. Each discovery felt like a betrayal. These were people William had trusted, people who had smiled at him while systematically diminishing his mother's memory. And behind all of it, whether giving direct orders or simply creating an environment where such decisions felt safe, was Camilla. William understood that Camilla faced an impossible situation. Living in the shadow of a beloved ghost could not be easy. The constant comparisons must be painful. Her desire to establish her own legacy was human and understandable. But understanding her position did not excuse what was being done. Diana had not just been a princess. She had been a mother who hugged her sons when royal protocol said she should not, who took them to homeless shelters and hospitals so they would understand their privilege came with responsibility, who fought to give them as normal a childhood as possible despite impossible circumstances, who died when they still desperately needed her. Her memory was not palace property to be managed for institutional convenience. It belonged to her sons. It belonged to the millions of people whose lives she had touched. It deserved protection, not strategic repositioning. In his private office that evening, William sat alone as darkness fell over London. Somewhere in this same palace, Camilla was likely having her own difficult conversations. Staff members were probably scrambling to understand the new reality. Advisors were certainly planning how to manage the situation. But William was not thinking about palace politics or public relations. He was thinking about his mother's laugh, her warmth, her courage, and his absolute determination that no one, regardless of their current power, would be allowed to diminish what she had meant to the world. The battle lines were drawn, and William would not retreat. Stay with us to know what happens next. When blood and duty collide, the royal family gathered for what should have been a routine dinner at Windsor Castle. These private meals happened regularly, moments when the family could shed their public masks and simply be relatives sharing food and conversation. That night, however, the usual warmth was missing. Everyone felt the tension hanging in the air like smoke that could not be cleared away. William arrived with Catherine, his face set in an expression that revealed nothing. Camilla sat beside Charles, her posture perfect, but her hands fidgeting slightly with her napkin. Charles himself looked older somehow, caught between his wife and his son in a conflict he desperately wished would disappear. Princess Anne watched everything with sharp eyes. She had served the royal family longer than almost anyone, through scandals and triumphs, never seeking spotlight, but always fulfilling duty. Anne had respected Diana's work even when palace politics made open friendship complicated. She also understood the impossible position Camilla occupied. Anne's loyalty was to the institution itself, which made her position in this conflict especially important. Prince Edward and his wife Sophie sat quietly, aware that whatever they said could tip delicate balances. Sophie had grown close to William over the years, becoming a trusted aunt figure to his children. She remembered Diana with fondness, but also recognized that the monarchy had to function in the present, not the past. Her sympathies were divided, making silence the safest choice. The meal proceeded with forced conversation about safe topics, upcoming engagements, grandchildren's achievements, weather and gardens. But underneath the polite words, everyone was thinking about the real issue that had brought them together. After dinner, Charles requested that William join him in the private study. This room had witnessed countless difficult royal conversations over generations. Tonight, it will host another. Charles began carefully. He acknowledged William's feelings about Diana's memory. He agreed that she deserved honor and respect, but he also asked William to consider Camilla's position. She had not asked to be compared endlessly to Diana. She was trying to fulfill her role as queen consort with dignity, despite facing hostility that would crush most people. Could William not find some compassion for how difficult her situation was? William listened to his father with the respect owed to both parents and king. Then he responded with careful words that carried unmistakable steel beneath their politeness. His compassion for Camilla's difficulties did not extend to accepting the erasure of his mother's legacy. Understanding her challenges did not mean tolerating decisions that diminished Diana's historic impact. He loved his father but would not sacrifice his mother's memory to make anyone more comfortable. Charles looked at his eldest son and saw Diana staring back at him. William had inherited her fierce protectiveness, her unwillingness to compromise on matters of principle, her ability to draw lines that could not be crossed. The same qualities that had made Diana both magnificent and impossible to control now lived in William. The conversation ended without resolution. Father and son embraced because they loved each other, but both knew the conflict remained unresolved. In another wing of the palace, Camilla spoke with Princess Anne. These two women shared something unusual in royal circles. They were both pragmatists who understood how institutions actually functioned versus how people wished they functioned. Anne had never been sentimental about royalty. She simply did her job with relentless competence. Camilla explained her perspective carefully. She was not trying to erase Diana. That would be impossible and wrong. But she also could not spend her entire reign living as a placeholder for a ghost. The monarchy had to move forward. That meant integrating past and present, rather than treating Diana's era as a separate, untouchable shrine. Was that truly so unreasonable? Anne considered this while looking out at the gardens Diana once walked through with young William and Harry. Finally, she spoke with characteristic bluntness. The problem was not Camilla's desire to establish her own legacy. That was natural and fair. The problem was that the actions taken appeared calculated to diminish Diana, rather than simply elevate Camilla. Combining the memorial events looked like strategic repositioning, not innocent efficiency. Restricting archive access seemed like control, not preservation. The optics were terrible, regardless of intentions. Camilla absorbed this assessment. Anne was not William's partisan. She was offering objective analysis from someone who understood palace politics better than almost anyone. If Anne saw the problem, then the problem was real. Meanwhile, William had his own conversations with family members whose support mattered. He spoke with Sophie, who listened with genuine sympathy. She agreed that Diana's memory deserved protection, but gently suggested that William's approach might be too confrontational. Palace changes happened slowly, through careful persuasion, rather than direct confrontation. Perhaps William could achieve his goals through strategic patience rather than public conflict. William appreciated Sophie's advice but disagreed with her assessment. Slow strategic patience had allowed the erosion of his mother's legacy to progress this far. Continued patience would only enable more damage. Sometimes confrontation was necessary, even if uncomfortable. He also spoke with Zara, Anne's daughter, who existed slightly outside the core royal structure. Zara had the family blood, but not the official titles and duties that complicated everything. She could speak more freely than most. She told William bluntly that he was right to fight for his mother's memory, but warned that he needed to be careful about how the battle was waged. The public would support him, but only if he appeared reasonable rather than vindictive. The moment he seemed to be attacking Camilla personally rather than defending Diana's legacy, he would lose the moral high ground. Back in London, Camilla's own allies were offering their perspectives. Close friends reminded her that she had fought too long and too hard for acceptance to risk it all now. Senior advisors suggested that perhaps some of the recent decisions had been too aggressive. Maybe the memorial event could be reconsidered. Maybe some archives could remain accessible. Strategic retreat was not defeated if it preserved larger gains, but Camilla had spent decades being compared unfavorably to Diana. She had endured public hatred, constant criticism, and the knowledge that millions of people wished she would simply disappear. She had finally achieved the position that should have granted her some peace and respect. Now she was being told to continue subordinating herself to a woman who had been dead for nearly 3 decades. The unfairness of it burned. Charles found himself in the most painful position of all. He loved his wife, he understood her frustration, and supported her desire for recognition. He also loved his son. He knew William's protectiveness of Diana came from genuine devotion, not political calculation. Charles had failed Diana during her life in ways he could never repair. He could not now fail to support the woman who had stood beside him through all the years since. Yet supporting Camilla meant disappointing William, and disappointing William meant driving a wedge between himself and his heir, the future of the monarchy. The family members who had once stood united behind palace walls now found themselves choosing sides or trying desperately to remain neutral. Every conversation, every decision, every statement carried weight beyond its immediate context. Old alliances were tested, new ones formed. The institution that prided itself on presenting unified strength to the world was fracturing from within, and at the center of it all were 2 women who had never truly met as equals. One was a memory, elevated beyond human complexity by death and public adoration. The other was flesh and blood, trying to live in a present that refused to release its grip on the past. The family would survive this conflict because royal families always survive, but the relationships within it, the trust and affection that made the institution more than just political theater, were sustaining damage that might never fully heal. William went home to his own family that night, kissing his sleeping children and holding Catherine close. Somewhere across London, Camilla did the same with Charles. Both sides believed they were right. Both sides felt wounded by the other. And the ghost of Diana, who had wanted nothing more than for her sons to be happy, watched silently as the family she had left behind tore itself apart in her name. The weight of a memory that refuses to fade. 27 years after her death, Diana's face still appears on magazine covers. Her photographs still sell for thousands at auction. Her dresses still draw crowds to museum exhibitions. Young people who were not even born when she died know her story and speak her name with reverence. She has become more than a person. She has become an idea, a symbol, a standard against which compassion itself is measured. But William remembers the woman behind the symbol. He remembers her hands braiding his hair before school. Her voice read bedtime stories with funny accents that made him and Harry laugh until their stomachs hurt. The way she smelled like flowers and safety. How she would sit on his bed when he was sad and simply hold him without needing words to understand what he felt. He remembers walking behind her coffin through London streets while a million people wept for his mother. He was 15 years old, drowning in grief so profound it felt like dying himself, yet forced to perform that grief publicly because he was royal and the world demanded to share his pain. He remembers thinking that nothing could ever hurt worse than that moment. He was wrong. Watching his mother's memory be diminished and controlled and reshaped to serve other people's purposes hurt in a different way. Deeper perhaps because it was deliberate rather than accidental tragedy. Diana's legacy rests on actions that transformed what royalty meant in the modern world. Before her, the royal family maintained careful distance from ordinary suffering. They attended charities, yes, but always with formal protocols that kept reality at arm's length. Diana shattered those protocols like glass. She held patients about to pass away when the world still feared touching them might spread disease. She walked through active minefields in Angola to draw attention to weapons that killed children long after wars ended. She sat with homeless people and drug addicts, not for photographs, but because she genuinely wanted to understand their struggles. She used her position not as privilege to protect, but as a platform to amplify voices nobody else would hear. The impact was revolutionary. Suddenly, being royal meant more than wearing crowns and waving from balconies. It meant using power to help powerless people. Diana showed that royalty could be relevant by being genuinely human. She saved the monarchy from its own obsolescence by proving it could still matter in people's real lives. This was her gift to the institution that had treated her so poorly. Even while her marriage crumbled, even while palace insiders leaked stories to destroy her reputation, even while she fought battles that left her isolated and heartbroken, Diana kept working. She kept showing up, she kept transforming lives, and she passed that understanding to her sons. William grew up watching his mother choose compassion over protocol. He learned that genuine service meant getting uncomfortable, listening to difficult truths, and using privilege to create change, rather than simply maintaining tradition. Everything William does in his own charitable work reflects lessons Diana taught through example rather than lectures. This is why her memory matters beyond sentimental attachment. Diana's legacy is not just about a beloved princess the public mourns. It represents a fundamental shift in how modern monarchy functions. Without her influence, the royal family might have continued its slow decline into irrelevant pageantry. With her influence, they found a path to meaningful contemporary purpose. Camilla understands intellectually that Diana changed the monarchy. How could she not? The evidence surrounds her constantly. Every time she visits a charity, she follows pathways Diana first walked. Every time she embraces someone in public, she uses language Diana invented. Every time she shows compassion in her official role, she operates within a framework Diana built. But understanding intellectually differs from accepting emotionally. Camilla has spent decades being the villain in Diana's story, the other woman, the reason the fairy tale marriage failed. Never mind that royal marriages had been cold arrangements for centuries before Diana arrived. Never mind that Charles and Diana's incompatibility ran deeper than any affair. Never mind that Camilla herself endured public hatred so vicious it would destroy most people. In the public imagination, Diana remains the wronged innocent, and Camilla remains the homewrecker. No amount of time or good works can fully erase that narrative. So Camilla tries to create space for her own legacy. She works hard at her duties. She supports important causes. She stands beside Charles with dignity through every public appearance. She deserves recognition for the genuine good she does. But every achievement is measured against Diana's shadow, and the comparison always finds Camilla wanting. The frustration of this must be crushing. To work so hard and know that people still wish you would disappear. To finally achieve the position you were denied for so long, only to find it comes with permanent second-place status. To know that even your husband loved someone else first and more publicly. Understanding Camilla's pain makes William's position more complex but does not change it. Her suffering, however real, does not justify diminishing his mother's legacy. Two truths can exist simultaneously. Camilla deserves recognition for her own work, and Diana's revolutionary impact deserves protection from revisionist management. The danger William sees is not immediate erasure. Diana is too beloved, her impact too profound, for anyone to simply delete her from royal history. The danger is subtler and more insidious. It lies in gradual shifts of emphasis, in small changes that individually seem reasonable but collectively alter fundamental narratives. Future generations will learn about Diana through the records and archives being shaped right now. If those records present her as simply one among many charitable royals rather than the transformative figure she actually was, then history itself is being rewritten. If her letters and personal materials become difficult to access, then scholars cannot tell her complete story. If memorial events dilute her singular impact into generic royal continuity, then her revolutionary nature gets lost. William imagines his own children learning about their great-grandmother from sanitized official histories that present Diana as a tragic but ultimately conventional princess. The thought fills him with fierce protective rage. Diana was not conventional. She was extraordinary. She changed the world in ways that deserve honest historical accounting, not political management. He thinks about conversations with his mother that he remembers with perfect clarity, despite decades passing. How she told him that being royal was a gift that came with responsibility. How she said that people who had privilege owed service to those who did not. How she insisted that compassion meant nothing unless it led to action. Diana lived those principles even when they made her life harder. Even when palace insiders called her difficult. Even when protocol demanded she maintain distance. Even when being genuinely human cost her personally. That is the legacy at stake. Not just memory of a beautiful woman who died too young. Not just sentimental attachment to a beloved public figure, but the fundamental principle that royalty must serve people rather than simply symbolize tradition. That power demands compassion. That privilege requires genuine human connection. If Camilla's efforts to establish her own space succeed in diminishing that revolutionary legacy, then something precious is lost. Not just for William personally, though that pain is real and deep, but for everyone who was inspired by Diana's example, for all the people whose lives changed because she showed them compassion, mattered more than protocol, for the future of a monarchy that must continue evolving toward relevance or risk, fading into meaningless ceremony. William carries this weight every day. The responsibility to protect truth, to guard his mother's memory, to ensure that history records what actually happened rather than what current powers find convenient. It is exhausting and painful. It puts him at odds with family members he loves. It creates conflicts he would prefer to avoid. But some battles cannot be avoided. Some truths must be defended regardless of cost. Diana taught him that through her own fierce commitment to using her position for good. Now William must honor that lesson by ensuring her legacy remains intact for generations who never had the privilege of knowing her personally. The memory that refuses to fade deserves protection, and William will provide it, whatever the personal price. Stay with us. Finding peace in an impossible situation. The palace eventually found its fragile balance, though not through dramatic confrontations or public declarations. Change came quietly, the way most real change happens within families who must continue living together despite deep wounds. Camilla withdrew several of the more controversial proposals. The memorial event honoring Diana would proceed as it always had, focusing solely on her legacy without dilution. Archive restrictions were quietly reversed. Plans for exhibitions were restored to their original scope. These reversals came without formal announcements or admissions of error. The palace simply corrected course, as though the troubling detours had never been proposed. William noticed these changes and accepted them without demanding public acknowledgement. He understood that allowing Camilla to save face made future cooperation more possible. Victory did not require humiliation. It only required that his mother's memory remain protected. At family gatherings, William and Camilla maintained polite distance, smiling for photos and performing their duties with professional grace, yet genuine warmth between stepson and stepmother seems impossible. History and conflicting loyalties have created a barrier that cannot easily be bridged. Charles watches this careful dance with a mix of love and sorrow, wishing for connection but knowing the past, and Diana's enduring memory make reconciliation unlikely. William has accepted his role as protector of his mother's legacy. His vigilance is inseparable from his sense of duty and love. He recognizes Camilla's humanity, understanding her struggles in an impossible position, and balances fierce defense of Diana's memory with acknowledgement of Camilla's own challenges. Camilla, in turn, understands her boundaries. She can shape her legacy as queen consort, but Diana's revolutionary impact remains untouchable. Whether frustrated or accepting, she knows the cost of overstepping. The palace continues, adapting while preserving tradition. The tension between past and present persists, becoming part of its ongoing story. Diana's memory endures not because it is managed, but because it was genuine, living through the lives she touched, the changes she inspired, and William's ongoing dedication to her compassionate work. The real question facing every powerful institution and every family is this: whose stories get told, who controls the telling, and what truth survives when memory meets political convenience? Diana's story survived because enough people refused to let it be reshaped. Her son stood as guardian, but he was not alone. Millions of ordinary people who remembered her compassion also held the line. Legacy is not something institutions give or take away. Legacy is what remains when power fades and only truth endures. Diana understood this instinctively. She built her legacy through actions that spoke louder than any official narrative could silence. And that legacy, protected by love rather than protocol, will outlast all the palace politics that tried to diminish it. As the palace leak shakes royal history, William's fury and Camilla's choices remind us that family and legacy are never simple. In protecting Diana's memory and facing delicate truths, the crown's story continues to evolve. Reflect on the past, witness the present, and remember, some legacies cannot be rewritten. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.